Hey, what's up? It's your girl Neek, and you're tuned in to Neek at Night. And tonight I'm going to be giving you guys a full, extensive breakdown on how the jury was selected in the Karmelo Anthony case, what questions the prosecution and defense focused on that kind of revealed what they're going to be going over tomorrow in their opening statements and throughout the case. It kind of revealed like what arguments they're going to have based on what they were asking the jury to basically try to see what their biases might be. Now, I was in the courtroom in the overflow room where we observed everybody who was, well, we observed everybody who's going to be on the prosecution and the defense team question the jurors. Now, the jurors were inside the courtroom. The camera was not facing the jurors. However, there were jurors when they got up and walked out, we can see them. And when they were in the very front row and they stood up, we can kind of see them as well. When they got dismissed, we were able to see, all of the people that got dismissed. And then we were able to see who got seated because they called them out by number and they all walked in front of the camera. So I have a lot of information. I was in there when they decided to strike all of the Black jurors. I was there on why they said they struck them. The defense challenged their choosing to strike all of them and felt like it was based on race. And we're going to go over all of that. I've been seeing some kind of chatter around where people are like, well, both sides picked them and the prosecution agreed for that to happen. And that's not what they agreed to. They contested it. They put in a motion for it and everything. And we're going to break it down, but I'm going to start off from the very beginning. I was there all day. So basically how the jury selection is going is they had all of the jurors, and it was a large number of them, in a totally separate room from all of the public, all of the media, even the legacy media that is selected. All of us were in an overflow room. This overflow room had monitors where we can look on the screen. And on the screen, we can see Karmelo Anthony, we can see his defense team, we can see the prosecution. And when they pan the camera over at the end, we can see the judge, but we can hear them, talk to the jurors. Some of the jurors were hard to hear, but sometimes the prosecution would basically repeat things that they said and etc. So I'm going to be going over everything that happened today. This may be a lengthy live, maybe not. I have so many pages that I jotted down as much information as I can. Now, in these types of cases, what they ask the jurors is very important because that is going to give you a guide on what each side is going to focus on in their case in chief. And I believe that some of the focus is going to be on the legal right to carry a knife. The defense asked several people, did they know that the same way that this is an open carry state and you can carry a weapon like a gun, and how it's legal to open carry a pew pew, did they know that it's also legal to go into a public stadium or a school event with a knife that is less than 5.5 inches? He kept emphasizing the size, 5.5 inches, and being less than that, and that being legal, and asking them like if they thought that was crazy, that that was the legal right. Did they know that that was legal and everything like that? They went over a lot of questions about self-defense, race, and age. Now, in the presentation of Karmelo Anthony, as we see him in these photos, he has hair. Well, today his hair was very low cut. I don't know if he lost weight or not, but he looks very, very small, very scrawny. And looking at him from the screen, he looked young. Like right now, today, he's 19 years old. But when you visually look at him, he looks very young. Like he looked visually, like if I don't know anything about him, if I don't know anything about the case and I just looked at him, I would think that that was probably like a 14 or 15-year-old teenager. He's 19 now, but a lot of that matters because a lot of the focus of the questions was based on that. It was based on if you can set aside finding him guilty or not guilty and listening to the facts and your bias, can you set aside your bias for how young he looks or how old he is or, things like that. And there was a lot of people who said that due to his age, they couldn't put him away for life. And then there were people on the opposite end who said that they felt like 5 years, because the range between a life sentence or the charge for is between 5 to 99 years. And there was several people who said that they feel like if you take a life, 5 years is too low to give you. And some people felt like, you take a life, you deserve, all these things. And there was a lot of information. So starting at the top, it is heavily emphasized that first come, first serve at the trial. And it is crucial when you're getting into a trial of this magnitude because every single person in the order that you come matters because that makes or breaks if you make it in or you don't make it in. So today there was, like I mentioned earlier, a situation where a person decided to walk to the front once we got in, because there's a line that forms outside. And then once we go through the security, then there's another line that should reflect the same line that was outside. However, when it's time to line up, some people take it upon themselves to walk to the front when they know that they were not first. So I simply walked and got into my first position, being that I was the first to arrive on the courthouse steps, etc. And then, but how that happened was I was first on the steps, first to line up. And then I think after about 40 minutes, I had went to my car and I had drove out the parking lot, came back in the parking lot. And my uncle, the whole time, he was holding my spot because when I went to drive out of the parking lot and come back in, he was there basically holding my spot. Came back in, resumed my spot. Then we went inside. I was still number one. And, that's how that happened. But, I'm sure things will be skewed when they reach other people's explanation. But moving on from that, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. I just felt like I had to, be sure to mention it as things get skewed. And anybody that's Black is a Karmelo Anthony supporter, whether you are a independent journalist, whether you don't know, the facts of the case, like me. I don't know the facts just yet. I know what is out on the surface, but I don't know the evidence to know if he's guilty or innocent. I'm operating as the jurors are requested to operate with the presumption of innocence, right? So some of us are reporting with the presumption of guilt, and they are, reporting that he's guilty. And anybody who does as the court advises to go in it with an open mind with the presumption of innocence, and then base your findings on his guilt or innocence once you know the facts of the case. I'm going in with that presumption. But, if you go in with that presumption and you want to hear the actual facts because you don't know the facts, the actual true facts, as there's so many rumors, if you're the color Black, if you're a Black woman or Black man, you're automatically labeled a Karmelo Anthony supporter, and things are automatically skewed in some type of way from other people that are speaking about it. So keep that in mind, when we're talking, but let's go forward. So I wanted to let's start off. Let's see. Okay, so let's go past that. Also to note that in the courtroom today, I don't know, it was this guy that was with this woman that he kept looking me up and down, kept eyeballing me, kept looking my way, and kind of like, every time I would like talk to like another colleague or a reporter, I noticed that this guy would be like looking at me, and then there was a woman next to him, and they kind of had this energy over there. So I just wanted to note that as well, that I felt very uncomfortable with this white man kept staring me down, this random guy that was sitting with this woman. That, but anyways, also when I came out to my car when I was leaving, I don't know if it was a coincidence, but his car was kind of like in front of my car, and then when he saw me, he drove forward. So I don't know if that was just a coincidence. He wasn't purposely in front of my car, but I found that to be interesting as well. But that's not here nor there. Let's go on to all right, so I'm going to repeat some of the things that I talked about earlier, and just take you guys completely through the day from start to finish. I did a live earlier when I was at the courthouse. If you guys did not check out my live when I was at the courthouse, definitely check it out. I was boots on the ground. I was at the courthouse. You can see that I was there, Collin County, courthouse behind me, reporting to you guys live while everything was coming out. And check that one out. But if you did, I'm going to still repeat some of the things that I said there, because in this live, we're going to go over everything. Now, with that being said, at the start of the hearing, the judge, he asked, he had made like a statement, like if anybody had any questions or concerns or something to that effect. I was trying to jot things down quickly. So, I sometimes I'll paraphrase because I can't write exact quotes. Like I type a lot faster than I write with a pen and paper. So the judge basically asked the guy, he like made a general statement, and he was basically like, if anybody had any questions or comments that they wanted to make. A guy got up and he said, "Oh, I forgot that I had a subpoena. I forgot that I had a subpoena that I had to go to." And very rudely, the judge was like, "I don't care that you have a subpoena. Sit down." And then I was like, ooh, that was a little bit much. Also, what I noticed right away when the cameras came on, like I said, we noticed Karmelo Anthony. He appeared to be extremely nervous. Like you can visibly see that he was nervous. He was, taking deep breaths. He was like, those things like that. And why this information is important is because a lot of you guys are not in the room and you want to know what's going on. There was also questions earlier as why do we care if he was nervous? Why do we care this or that? Because people want to know what the atmosphere was like, what the prosecution atmosphere was like, what their temperament was, what the defendant was doing. That's all the types of questions that I always get anytime that I cover a trial. And this has been, I don't know how many of trials that I've covered, but we always like to give the background of what the energy in the room is. So immediately off the bat, Karmelo Anthony's energy was nervous. He had a very high nervous energy. He was looking around. He was kind of like, looking a little fidgety. You can tell like in his facial expression, he was worried. His defense team, they were like, in the start, they were kind of like jotting things down on their notepads. And the prosecution was the first to do their voir dire. So the prosecution had about an hour and 45 minutes to do their portion of the voir dire. And then after they went, then the defense had an hour and 45 to do their voir dire. So when the prosecution went up to do their voir dire, what I noticed right off the bat were there were 4 people at the prosecution table. There appeared to be a white man that was the main prosecutor, who is Dewey Mitchell, and then his co-counsel was also a white male. There was a lady in the back. I'm not sure what her role was, as far as like she was helping them like write down all of the information. I was seeing her like notate everything like the jurors were saying. It was her and another woman. One woman looked to be Hispanic, and then the other woman was white. On Karmelo Anthony's side of his defense, his main defense attorney is a white man by the name of Mike Howard. And then his co-counsel was a white man as well. And then there was two ladies in the back table that were like, I saw them writing down like what the jurors were saying. Those were two white women as well. A lot of people always want to hear basically what the makeup is of the prosecution and the defense. Now, when the prosecution went, or the prosecutor, the main prosecutor went up to do his voir dire, what I noticed right off the bat was he was charming. He was charismatic. He had a bubbly personality and he was likable. I've covered a lot of cases where more often than not, the prosecution is a-holes. They're mean and they're unlikable. And it makes you kind of, even if you like don't have an affinity for the defendant to be innocent or not, it makes you kind of want to go again, like in your mind. Like I'm not served on the jury, but in my mind, I've always thought like, ooh, I don't like that prosecutor, and that kind of affects the outcome, in my opinion, of the case. Now, in this situation, the prosecution or the prosecutor that spoke, he was charming. He had humor. He was funny. He was making jokes. He wasn't like mean and overbearing like I've seen a lot of the prosecutors. Like, think about the YSL trial with Miss Love, Attorney Love. She was unbearable. I also did the ASAP Rocky trial where the prosecution in that case, he was so overzealous, rude. It was just crazy. So the prosecutor, he was warming up to the jury. He was making them laugh. He made a joke about, oh, you guys got me feeling like I'm Kevin Hart up here. And then he went to his co-counsel to show their height difference and how he's a short man and how his co-counsel is like very tall. And he was like, making jokes. I couldn't hear if the jury room was laughing, but I know that a lot of people in the overflow room, when he was making these jokes, people were laughing. They found him humorous. They were like I can see the people in the overflow like warming up to the prosecutor. And I believe that his personality and the tactic that he used was very effective in getting the jury to talk and be honest about their answers. He made them feel like he kept saying like, yeah, you see, they answered and they're still here. Nobody's got kicked off yet. Like, you see, this person gave their answer and, they're still here. They haven't left yet. So even though he knows that they weren't going to pick who gets struck out until the very end, but while he was questioning, he kept like, I think both of them kept like making a note, like, look, he answered, they gave that answer and they're still here, that type of thing. And I can tell that after those type of comments, more and more people were being forthcoming, more and more people were speaking up, more and more people were saying how they felt. It felt a lot like, if you ever watch those First 48 interrogations where there's a criminal and the detective like tells the bad guy, he's like, oh, I know that you're not a bad person. As soon as they say that, I know that you're not a bad person, and then the criminal like finally spills all the details on the crime, and then they give him that, oh, thank you, I know you feel much better getting that off your chest. And then right after they get everything off their chest, they go and lock them up. That's kind of what it gave, but this was with the jury. So, he was warming them up, buttering them up, and they were forthcoming and they had a lot to say. So his name is Mr. Dewey Mitchell. He is the assistant district attorney. He said that he was from a little town in Oklahoma, says he's never been the smartest person in the room. He wants to be clear about what we're doing today. And he talked about how the judge spoke about things being fair. And he basically made a reference to a joke, or not a joke, but a comment that the judge had made on Monday, where the judge was basically saying that he thinks that everybody should drive 55 miles an hour, and he doesn't think that anybody should go over 55 miles an hour, and everybody should, go that speed limit, etc. And so the first thing that Dewey Mitchell did was he said, listen, I want you guys to know that I think it's fine if you drove 70 miles an hour, like warming up to them and everything, like showing that, like, the contrast of, like, look, the judge, like, he didn't say this, but to me, that's what I picked up was, look, the judge is very strict, but I'm cool. Like, I'm the cool guy. Like, that's kind of what it gave. Like, look, he's a meanie, but I'm cool. Like, I'm the cool guy. Like, that's what it gave to me. So then he talked about his job and what they expect when somebody is accused of a crime. They want them to have a fair trial. He said that the probability of juror number 449 being on the jury was not probable, but he wanted him to pay attention anyways. And he said that if anybody has a feeling that the case wasn't going to be right for them, if they heard anything on the news about the case and they felt like they could not set their bias aside, he wants them to speak. He doesn't want them to wait for them to get into the jury room. And then once you're in the jury room, now you're like, oh, well, I can't, like, I'm kind of biased. I can't make a decision. They wanted to weed out as many people as possible who had a potential bias before there was the chance to get in the jury room. And then now you're speaking about, this bias that you have and everything like that. So he also talked about that he wanted everybody to answer truthfully, and they want 12 people on the jury who can keep an open mind and listen to the law and the evidence. He asked if there was any baseball parents there, and he talked about his kids' team and how they were a bad team, and if they lose a game, they have to play at 8 a.m. the next day. He said that all he could think about was how, as a community, how will he be able to approach these topics to the jury. It was a lot of topics about race and age, and he was like pondering how he can pose these things to the jury. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what he was getting at. He said he wanted to know, how does race play into it? And he talked about his fear around how to approach it. He said that he wants them to just talk to him and speak. And he said the more a person spoke, the better chance they got at not being on the jury. He said that he said, like, what is the concept of a fair trial? And he talked about the concept for a fair trial is the presumption of innocence. You have to presume they're innocent. And there has been people who went to trial that hasn't done anything. If the state of Texas is going to charge you, they better be able to prove it. That person is innocent until the state of Texas can prove otherwise. Whether a person testifies does not prove if they are guilty or not guilty. What I'm asking is, if any of you feel like if somebody doesn't testify, you are going to hold it against them. And then so everybody stayed quiet. And then he talked about wait, what? Yeah. Oh, so then he did an analogy, and he walked up to, I'm sorry, I got a bunch of scrabble on the paper. So then he went up to his co-counsel and he did an analogy, and he was like, he walked up to his co-counsel and he put his hands up to him and he said, so, hey, this is my co-counsel. If I go up to my co-counsel and I shoot him in the head, and all of you guys see me shoot him in the head, does he have a right to a fair trial? I mean, do I have a right to a fair trial? And then he was like, yes. So he said, what, like, asking the jurors, like, what they felt about that. Like, what do you feel about what analogy he just used? And then he asked, would they hold it against Karmelo Anthony if he doesn't testify? One of the jurors said that she doesn't know the answer to that. And then she asked, could they follow the law if the judge told them to not hold it against them. So then he explained about how it is the prosecution's burden to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defense does not have the burden to prove anything, in that they are expected to not hold it against the defendant if they choose not to testify. And he wanted to know if there was anybody who would listen to the case and hold it against Karmelo Anthony if he chooses not to speak. And then he went through different jurors to see how they felt about it. So one of the jurors said, wait. And they wanted to know if any of them heard about the case, or if they knew about the case, or anything like that. And what they, based on what they already know about the case, could they hold that against Karmelo and not consider the evidence that is presented and not follow the law? So then different jurors started to speak about how majority of them already heard about the case. Majority of them had already known things about the case. Family members had talked to them about the case, etc. So one juror said, I heard about it from my daughter. I saw people holding signs on both sides, but I don't know the facts to form an opinion. The prosecutor said he feels, that's when he gave his analogy about Kevin Hart. And then it says, okay, and then he wanted to know, okay, so basically on Monday, there was a group that was advocating for Austin Metcalf, and they were holding up signs and saying that he deserves justice. And then there was groups that were supporting Karmelo Anthony, and they were right in front of the courthouse, and they were, loudly supporting Karmelo. So what the prosecution was basically then asking them is who saw the signs, and who, did they know what the signs meant, and did they know about the case? So, and if they could set that information aside to make a fair verdict based solely on the evidence. It says they were asking if, anybody felt like that would affect their judgment. One juror started talking. I couldn't really hear what he was saying. Some of the jurors, when they spoke, some of them would be, I guess, further back, and some stuff I could hear, some stuff he would repeat, some stuff I couldn't hear. So one guy, I couldn't hear him. And then he said, is there anybody who can't let it go, or has a fear that what their family or church think of their decision will affect their decision? So, is there anybody who, you have family that have strong opinions about the case, and because your family has strong opinions about the case, do you feel like you won't be able to listen to the evidence and make your own decision based on that? And a juror stood up and says that he has a son at the same age of both the defendants and the victim, and he thought, what would I think if that was my kid? So he personalized it. It was a white man, basically. He didn't make it on the jury, but he was a white man, and he was basically saying that, I put myself in the shoes of what if that was my son, what would I think, or whatever, insinuating that he would be leaning in favor of the victim versus the defendant or whatever. And the prosecution basically said, I don't care what you feel about it or what your opinion is. I promise I want to know, but I don't care. He said, if you base it on you having kids and not the law and evidence, then that's a problem. So the prosecution was telling them well, I understand that you have kids. And then he even elaborated that a lot of you guys have kids. We can't base the ruling on guilt or innocence based on if you got kids or not. You need to base your decision on the law and the evidence that is presented. And he kept basically reinforcing that it is up to the prosecution to basically have the burden to prove that fact. We got to prove it, but you can't just base it off of I got a kid, so this is, he's guilty, or I would think he's guilty, or, like that. So then one of the jurors said that she was a middle school teacher and she thinks about the impact down the road. Once she found out about the case, she doesn't think she can do it. So she was basically saying that she teaches middle school kids and she kind of knows like the nuances of different things. And in her mind, she didn't think that she would be able to make a decision on his life down the road. The prosecution says that he was like, okay, well, that means that this might not be the case for you. And the whole time, the prosecution, he was so charming. Like, I cannot even express enough. Like, he was charming. Like, I was like, ooh, I've never seen a prosecutor as smooth. Like, he was smooth. And those types that are smooth like that's even more of a battle for the defense because of that fact. So anyways, and also too, let me take just a quick break to say it is a lot of you guys in the room, a lot of you guys who are new here. I can tell by some of the comments, and I can see the thumbnail pictures. Normally, I have a majority all Black audience, but I see that there are a lot of thumbnails that are not, and I see a lot of comments that are very different than what they normally would be for my channel. We welcome you guys all here. Thank you for watching. My name is Neek. I am an acquired taste. I am an independent media reporter. I cover trials, gossip, social events, mostly in the Black community, and my audience is mainly Black individuals. I don't really tackle I don't really deal with a lot of like racist, but I understand that this case has a lot of racist pouring on in, and me simply being a Black woman, a lot of you guys, because I'm Black, you are writing in the comments as if I've killed somebody. I've never murdered anybody. I've never done that. I've not been, you know what I mean? So it's interesting to see like the vitriol that you have just simply because I'm Black, and you're putting your vitriol on a defendant that I have no ties to on me just because of the color of my skin. But thank you for watching. Make sure you hit the like button. And if you don't like me just because I'm Black, hit the dislike button. It, makes me know, never mind. But thanks for watching. Those of you guys who enjoy the commentary and enjoy listening to all of the details that mainstream media is not going to give you, they're only going to give you the quick hot button points. No Black jurors, no, you know what I mean? They're not going to give you like all of the intricate nuances. And then the other people that claim to give you all of the intricate nuances is going to be lopsided. It's going to be one-sided. Everything is going to be Black people are criminals, uncouth, can't act. Everything is going to be skewed one way. Me, I'm able to be fair. The prosecution was charming. The prosecution was good. Will you see that type of balance other places? No. Everything for the defense is going to be the worst thing, and everything for the prosecution is going to be the best. I'm not like that. If the prosecution does good, we're going to say it. If the defense does good, we're going to say it. If they do bad, we're going to say it. If there's something that is in Karmelo's favor or not in his favor, we're going to say it. The other people are not. Everything is going to be the worst possible outcome for Black people, the worst possible narrative for Black people. Anybody Black is going to be labeled a Karmelo Anthony supporter. Anybody Black is going to be everything under the sun. And we see how they feel about us by their thumbnails, their comments, and we can distinctively tell who is here to listen to unbiased, fair reporting, and who is here just to cause racial division, and who is here to try to stir up the pot and, show that and let it be known how much they don't like Black people. Like, they're using this case to let us know how much they don't like us and how much our existence bothers them. Okay. But with that being said, if you guys want to support the channel, hit the like button. If you don't like the channel, hit the dislike button. If you want to support my travel fund, donate to my Cash App, Neek at Night Media. That is going to help fund me staying here. You know, my uncle has been helping. I had other people in the cut. They all drove from different places, and although he's not charging me, I would like to compensate him on his time. So if y'all can help out, you know, lighten the load on that, just so that I am, you know, there, I'm not by myself, and, you know, his time is valuable as well. All of that would be appreciated. Neek at Night Media, I'm going to try my darndest to do the best that I can to lay out both sides, all nuances. We're not going to have this one-sided everything for just because you're Black is the worst of the worst. We're going to enter this thing with the presumption of innocence as the same thing that the judge and the prosecutors told the jury to do. And we're going to report just like that. We're not going to go off of, you know, rumors, narratives, anything like that. We're going to go off of what is said in court. With that being said, let's get back to it. And like I said, welcome to all of the new people here. All right, so let's go back where we left off. Oh, okay. So he was telling that juror that might be not the right case. All right. So, so then that's when another juror, was a Black man. He said, I don't know that I feel right putting a brother in jail. So anybody who made any type of statements like this, where they said like, well, I don't know that I can convict him because of his age, or I don't know if I can convict him because he's so young. These people were excluded from the jury. So this comment excluded him. So it pushed him further. It was like the opposite. Like, I don't want to put a brother in jail, but then if you are not wanting to put him in jail, then you would think that you would want to be on the jury so that you can make sure things are fair. Don't just not send him to jail because he's not Black, because he's Black. But if you're on the jury, you can make sure that the evidence is what everybody is basing it on and not just his race, if that makes sense. So it's like by you saying that, you put him further in jail than not, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyways. So the prosecution said, remember me saying, based it on the law and evidence, asked if they find him guilty, can he follow the law and put an African man in jail? And then he doubled down on it and he said no. So a different juror says they have a moral religious beliefs that they can't sentence someone to jail, and says it violates their religious views to accept punishment. So he probed a little bit more on that. Like, what do you mean by that? And they were basically saying that based on their religion, they can't like say, hey, this person is guilty, sentence them to XYZ. That's kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically kind of, what was said. So then there was a woman who, she sounded Latin, and she went into this story about her kids and how she tells them to defend themselves. And then she talked about some situation that happened at school. And it was like this long drawn out thing. And I was like, what is she talking about? She was saying like how she tells them to defend themselves no matter what. And I think at the end, she ended up saying like, but not with a knife or a gun, or it was something like that. But in order to get like what she was saying, like, it was this long story that just was like, okay, well, like how like 1 + 1, like, okay, how do like what are we doing here? Like, it was drawn out. So the prosecution said, I want to talk to y'all about the crime. Let's talk a little bit about what murder is. First degree, second degree murder in Texas, they have different offenses based on what's in the mind of the individual. He talked about negligent homicide. He talked about manslaughter. And he talked about whether or not, he said, murder is the intentional or knowing of taking a life Then he talked about capital murder. There is nothing in the law in the state of Texas on premeditation. He said 10 okay, he said what if somebody says, I didn't mean to kill somebody, and they say they just meant to wound them, but they take a life? You can't say, well, I didn't mean to do it. So he was basically saying, okay, like, what if you have a person that says, hey, like, I stabbed them, but I didn't mean to kill them. I just wanted to hurt them, but I just wanted to stab them, but then they ended up dead anyways. He was basically saying, like, you can't turn around and say, oh, well, they're dead, but like, I didn't mean to kill them. Like, that's basically what he was saying. And then he said that if the jury can like consider that and use that, and then the prosecution says there's nothing in the law that says that they planned it by premeditation or that they have to prove premeditation. So he basically said, I think somebody asked about, like, okay, like, what if it was premeditated or something like that? And the prosecution was saying that their burden that they have to prove is they don't have to prove that the person planned it. Like, they don't have to prove that whether or not, like, it was premeditated or not. They just have to prove that it was murder, basically. And in so many words, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he was saying. So one of the jurors asked about manslaughter, and they said that they wanted to know, like what about manslaughter? And then the prosecution said that in the state of Texas, they have what's called sudden passion. So instead of, I guess, it being labeled as manslaughter in the state of Texas, it's labeled as sudden passion. So then he said, anybody on the first row feel that says, I hear what you're saying, but if we are talking about someone young, that may affect you to render a true verdict. The law doesn't say you get to commit a crime because you are a teenager. So he was basically asking and probing if anybody on the jury thinks that because he's young, you might not be able to find him guilty. And then he went on to basically say, just because you're a teenager doesn't mean that you get to commit a crime. Like, oh, I'm a teen, so I can commit a crime. And then have people thinking that because you're a teenager, that you can get in trouble for it. And then he wanted to know if the fact that he is young, will that affect anybody on the jury's decision to render a verdict and on guilty or innocent or not guilty. And then one of the jurors said that I can't promise to render based on age, says for punishment, but can't find guilty or not guilty. The prosecution went through each row asking if age will play into them making a decision on finding someone guilty. And then they wanted to know, one of the jurors asked about like the alternates, and he said that the jurors will not know who the alternates are. So all of them will go into it under the presumption that they are the juror, and they won't know who's the alternate and who's not until the end. One of the jurors says she has things going on in her life that she doesn't know that she can send somebody young to jail for the rest of their life based on one conflict or mistake. So she was basically saying, listen, like, he's a young guy. Like, I don't know that I can commit to sending him to jail off of one mistake that he made in his life. Like, I don't think that I can do that. And then so the prosecution said, some of y'all are looking like that boy looks like a kid. To me, is there anybody who feels like 276 that it looks like a kid, so you can't take the oath? Because some of them expressed how young he looked. And like I said, I was looking at the TV monitor and he looked young. Like, he looked little and like he looked like a kid. He did. Not a kid, but he looked young. And so he said, do you think you will base your verdict on age rather than law and evidence? one of the jurors said that he isn't sure he can take the oath this week. The prosecutor said there are two phases in a trial in Texas, guilt or innocence. Did the state prove their case? The only question for the jury is, did the person commit that crime, not what they did before or not? Because I think one of the questions was, does their prior criminal history come into play? And then he was responding that like it doesn't matter like what they did before or after, like what matters is the crime that's before them and if he's guilty or innocent of that. And then that's when I wrote my note where I said the prosecutor has a very charming and likable personality. Another juror said they don't feel they can make a decision and they couldn't. I couldn't really hear them, but they said that what the prosecution responded, they couldn't make a decision. Okay, so another juror said, I will not feel comfortable finding an African American male guilty. And then, so that was the second guy that was a black guy who said, I will not feel comfortable finding an African American male guilty. And then he said, anybody, so then the prosecution said, anybody feel race can affect guilt or innocence? One of the jurors said, race plays a role with who gets charged with what, and concerned about that with this case. Now, this juror was, hold on, let me make sure this was one of the ones that was excused. I believe this one was definitely excused. Hold on, let me check, let me double check the final numbers. Yeah, they were excused. So anyways, so they made like a big point about, and when I jotted what they said, I kind of like tried to get like the key. I didn't write like every single word for word because I'm trying to keep up with a pen and paper. But so I wrote like that. But basically, they made a speech about how certain people get charged when others don't. That kind of was their reason why they felt like race played a role. They said that they feel like, race plays a role with who gets charged with what, and they're concerned about it. Basically, they were alluding to like, they didn't say they don't feel like if he was not black, he wouldn't have been charged, but that's what they alluded to. Basically, like, I'm concerned because it's evident that some people get charged when other people won't. That's what they were saying. And then the prosecution said, all I can ask is that you guys be as honest as possible, knowing your beliefs. Will that play into you finding someone guilty or not guilty? And one of the jurors talked about moral decisions. Many jurors said they don't know if they could base the verdict on the evidence and other factors may weigh. Then I think, well, I got a different time here, 10:30. So I think we must have left and came back. So he asked, so basically then he made it a point to say, what do you think about if somebody provokes you into a fight and they provoke you to like fight them, and then you react to them fighting, like to them provoking you, and then they kill you. How do they feel about that? Like, you can't provoke somebody to fight you, and then when they fight you, you kill them, and then claim that you're innocent. It's like, that's kind of like what he was explaining in so many words. And that was like one of the points that he was making. I have so many pages left. Let me know if you guys just want me to paraphrase the rest, or do y'all want me to like literally walk y'all through what everybody is saying. If I rock through everything, it's going to be pretty lengthy, but I have time. If y'all let me know, like, do you guys like this pace? Does it seem too drawn out, or do you prefer me going through what each person said? Like, how do you guys feel about that? Let me know right now, because I could just start, paraphrasing some things or whatever. But I kind of feel like when you're not in the room, you kind of want to know, like, what are they saying? What are they basing it off of? And things like that. So let's see. Let me see what y'all. Somebody said, great details. You're doing great. I want to hear. Yes, keep the pace. Let me see. Oh, wait, hold on. Somebody said, don't paraphrase, tell the truth. Give us details. Okay. All right. Somebody said, I love the details. All right. So also, super chats, cash apps, all of those things help a sister out. So even if you don't like me, but you enjoy the content, you know what I'm saying? Tip the host. Anyways, all right. So we'll keep the same pace, but I'll try to speed it up a little bit. I know that it's a lot to go over. I was writing. I was trying to get as much down as possible. All right. So, oh, hold on. What was the last? All right. So then one of the jurors said that she has a problem because to her, he looks like a child and she wouldn't want him to spend his whole life in jail. And she hoped that he learned. And she said that she wouldn't want to she didn't feel comfortable sentencing him to jail because when she was looking at him, he looks like a kid. She wouldn't want him to spend the rest of his life in jail. And she was basically saying that the prosecution was probing and asking, like, okay, so even though he looks like a child, like, are you able to set aside the way that he looks, and are you able to base it off of the evidence and the law? And she basically responded, and she was basically saying that she feels as like she hopes that he learned from this. Like, she was like, I just hope he learned from it. I don't feel comfortable sentencing him to jail. All right. So then and then she talked about kids and parents about proportionality, said that this is a microcosm of a school, social, economic, classes, all those things impact the goal. And the rule is to have critical thinkers with proportionality. So that's what she said. And she said that she can't do it. All right. So, and then, so Karmelo Anthony had the decision to decide if the judge punishes him in the penalty phase. Like, if he's found guilty, he was able to decide whether the judge gives him his sentence or if the jury gives him the sentence. He decided that he wants the jury to hand him his sentence. And so that's what they also were emphasizing, that the importance of them in jury duty, because not only are they going to be finding him guilty or innocent, it is also their responsibility to determine whether he gets 5 to 99 years. The charge carries a sentence of 5 to 99 years, and they were putting the burden on them, or the responsibility of them, to know that they're the ones who's going to be sentencing him. They're the ones who's going to be coming up with the sentencing range. They're the ones who is going to determine everything of this case, other than the judge is basically just going to be calling, like sustaining the objections, overruling, or admitting certain things in evidence or not in evidence. That's the judge's role. But their role is to listen to the evidence that does come in. Now, the judge, his power is in what comes in and what doesn't. A lot of people in the comments are probably thinking like, well, why can't the judge make decision on that? The judge is making the biggest decision that the judge can make is what they get to hear to base their decision off of. There could be critical things that can make you think otherwise, but that wasn't presented to you because the judge didn't allow it in. And that can totally change, the thought process or whatever in the case. So the judge has a lot of power, and he's going to be exercising a lot of power on what makes it in and what doesn't. And their goal or their job is based on what does make it in to determine from that. So keep that in mind. So anyways, so another person said that they don't think that they could set punishment. Another person said that they think that it will be hard to give him life. And they wanted to know, another person said that she said that he would go towards the lower side of punishment. He said, because he's so young, if he was to make a decision on how long he got in jail, he would lean towards the lower side because of his age. And he says, I don't believe in this case because of his age, and I would go lower. Another juror said, being a mom, she said that she can't decide on the punishment due to his age. Another person says they would find it very difficult to find any range of I just put very difficult to find any range. I don't know. Anyways, next. Another juror says, you keep saying the word life. I want to confirm you are only talking about imprisonment. And then another person asked, how old? They were like, you guys keep talking about his age. Like, how old is he? And then the prosecution says that he can't tell them the age right now because he can't tell them in this phase the facts of the case. The facts of the case only come when they are seated. All right. So another person says, I don't think I can consider life if he said, okay, so he was saying that he said that when he thinks about a person serving life in prison, he thinks about the worst of the worst, like the worst of the worst criminals, like the person that committed like the most heinous crimes. He feels like the life sentence is reserved for people like that. Based on Karmelo Anthony, I'm paraphrasing what he said. He didn't say it exactly like that, but that's what he was basically saying. He said he doesn't think he can consider life because he reserves those types of punishments for the worst of the worst. So I inferred that he must think that Karmelo isn't the worst of the worst. Another juror, they also said that they couldn't consider life. Another juror says, what if it's in the heat of the moment? So the prosecution said, in Texas, you can consider something being done in the heat of the moment, and that's called sudden passion, where something happens and they don't have the time to cool off. If you guys find that his charge fell under sudden passion and not first-degree murder, the sentencing range would be between 2 to 20 years. So if he was found guilty on first-degree murder, the range would be 5 to 99 years. But if they found that this was something that happened in the heat of the moment, and it was just like what we describe as a crime of passion, in Texas, they label it sudden passion, and that sentence would range 2 to 20 years. So at that time, we broke for lunch. That's when I did my live outside. And then when we came back after lunch, it was time for the defense to do their voir dire. So we went out. I did my live that you guys saw on the court grounds. And then we went back in. And when we went back in, it was time for Karmelo Anthony's lawyer to do his voir dire. So when he got up to do his voir dire, they turned on the monitors when he was already speaking. So when he introduced himself, or if he introduced himself instead, like, because the prosecution, he gave a background on like, oh, I come from a small town, I'm the district attorney, et cetera, et cetera. When it came to Karmelo Anthony's lawyer, They turned on the TV monitor and the audio after lunch, after he was already talking to the jury. So I was like, what's up with that little delay? Like, we don't get to hear what he said in the beginning. So if he described like his background, we didn't hear that. So anyways, so once when they turned on the audio, it says the question in this case is, if you in a moment felt your life was in danger, you have a right to defend yourself. So he was focused on self-defense and why Karmelo Anthony was within his rights to have a knife, and why it's legal to carry a knife, and why he was like, we're going to get into all of those things now from the defense. So his defense attorney is Mike Howard, and he says freedom either applies to all of us or they shouldn't apply to none of us. Okay. He said, oftentimes there is a government overreach. So he also too was trying to explain to the jury their power and why they're in the position that they're in, because government oftentimes has a lot of overreach, dictatorship, and because they don't want this to be a dictatorship, they want them to be able to make decisions with a jury of their peers. And he said that he feels like this is their duty to make sure that our rights are protected. He says, when we answer our call to jury duty and the law is given to us and we protect our freedoms, he like boldly walked to the front and he says, I am proud to represent Karmelo Anthony. I'm going to refer to him as Melo. This is a big and important day for Melo. So he said for the rest of the trial, he said all of Karmelo Anthony's family, all of his friends and classmates, none of them call him Karmelo. They all call him his nickname Melo. So he said that he's going to refer to him as Melo. And he emphasized how proud of him and how proud he was to represent him in this case. He said that he wasn't going to try to duplicate anything that the prosecution went over, but that he wanted to reiterate some of the important things, but he was going to make sure that he didn't like duplicate and keep reiterating the same things that they already heard. So he was kind of trying to let them know that like you may hear similar things, but I'm going to take a different approach. So he said, the oath you took today is different than the oath you will take if you are on the jury. That honesty is to be honest with yourself. And it says, juror number 13, stand up. What does brutal honesty mean to you? And the juror said, it means it's going to hurt the person being honest or the person hearing. So he was basically saying brutal honesty to him means that whether or not it hurts you or not, like tell the truth. That's kind of what he was saying. He said, as a father and a parent, we have to say things to protect. And then he started talking fast and I couldn't keep up. But he was basically saying like, sometimes you have to like protect your children and you have to tell them like the brutal, honest truth, like even if it's going to hurt them, you have to be honest. So that was his explanation of like brutal honesty. And then the prosecutor said, telling the truth, whether other person wants to hear it or not, because it's the truth. There are no right or wrong answers in jury duty. We don't want you to tell us what you think we want to hear. The judge doesn't want you to tell us what you think we want to hear. We use the word bias and prejudice. Bias means you start off with a leaning before hearing the evidence. Many told us that you know things or thought you knew things about the case, and based on that, you formed an opinion. How many of you that think that you know about the case, how many of you think that you can set aside what you know to basically make a decision on the evidence? So one of the jurors stood up and said, possibly, I didn't see a lot of details, but what I heard on the news, he said, I didn't see a lot of details, but what I heard on the news. So as soon as he said what, like those words, what I heard on the news, the judge immediately jumped in, and the judge was like, nope, stop. He was like, don't say what you heard on the news. We don't want to hear, we don't want to hear you say what you heard on the news. Y'all saying to change the chat thing. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. 1 second, y'all. Hold on. Let me do it real quick. Let me see. Are they cutting up in the chat? How do I do it? Wait. Wait, is it here? All right, I think I changed it. I'm not sure. Did I change it? Did I change it? Anyways, tell me if I changed it. Is it on subscriber only? Okay, all right. So, all right, let's see. Damn, where was I at? Oh, okay. So the guy, he basically said, he said, based on what I heard, he was like, I didn't see a lot of details, but what I heard on the news, and then the judge jumped in and he was like, nope, don't say what you heard on the news. And then he said, and then the prosecution was like, based on then he said, based on what I heard, I already formed an opinion. And then the defense said, can you take the oath and say you can set that aside? And then the juror says, I'm not sure. I'm just being honest. And then he says, how many of you feel like juror number 19, where you think that you know something you've been exposed to about the case and you can't set that aside? So another juror says, I fall into the same category as 19. I do a lot of reading in my younger age, and I've been in a similar situation. He said, and in my situation when I was younger, I ran like hell. I was unscathed. I was unscarred, and nobody was harmed. I want this gentleman to have a fair and honest trial. And so he was basically saying, listen, I've been in similar situations, and my method was running. I ran away from it, and I wasn't harmed, and they weren't harmed. And because of my own experience of, running from confrontation, I don't think I'm right for this jury. And I think that he should have somebody that can set the bias aside. I cannot. And so the defense says, so basically what you're saying is, I can't set my life experience aside and not base my knowledge on the evidence. And then the juror responded, he said, I'm not sure. And then the defense said, based on that, you feel you can't set aside and follow the law. And then another juror says, relationships that I've had, I can't be sure that I can form a decision. So the defense said, okay, well, let's switch topics. The law says the burden is on the government to prove the case, and it never switches to the defense for anything. A lot of people say they can follow that law so a lot of people say that they can follow that law in a theft case, but in a case with murder, that's a different ball game for me. So he was basically, the defense was saying, there's some people who say like, oh, I could follow the law if it's like somebody just steals something or something like petty crime. But when it comes to murder, like, are you going to let emotions override law and evidence? That's what he was saying in so many words. So another juror says, and I found this interesting. He was like, juror 269 says, I follow this case a lot, and I know a lot about the case outside sources. He said, I follow this case a lot, and I know a lot about the case, and he has outside sources. He said, it's hard to follow the case and not hear the defendant say something and not hold it against him. Says it's difficult to ignore that he has been silent. He can't set that aside. So he was basically saying that he's been watching the news, he's been following the case, he got insiders into the case, and because the defendant has exercised his right to remain silent, he holds that against him. Okay, he feels like that makes him, he didn't say that makes him guilty, but that's what he was saying. Like, if you're innocent, you would speak, but because you are exercising your right to remain silent, I find that fishy. That's basically, in so many words, what he was saying. Another juror number 213 says, more of a question most of us know we hear most is from TV. Is it his job to speak or his attorney? So the other juror that spoke up was kind of like clapping back a little bit. I was like, oop, not the clap back. So the other juror was basically like, is it his job to speak or is it his attorney's job to speak? Like, like he has an attorney. That's kind of like what they were saying. And they wanted to know whose job is it to determine whether he speaks or doesn't speak. And the defense attorney, he responded and he said, we give him advice, but the defendant, it's his choice whether he speaks or not, but ultimately we advise him. And so the juror says, I understand not speaking, but I feel if you were not innocent of a crime, you would be yelling from the rooftop. Most who heard about the case formed an opinion. So he felt like, and I probably wrote it weird, but he felt like if you are an innocent person, you wouldn't be quiet. Like, you wouldn't be silent. Like, you would be yelling your innocence to the mountaintop. But what this person has to realize is, if you already know that you have the right to remain silent and anything that you say can and will be used against you, then it might be wise to not speak until it's time to make a statement. And that's your right, whether you speak or not. So another person says, I feel like I'm not the right juror for this case. Another person says, I feel the same way based on the media coverage. You, the defense, would have to prove something otherwise. Another person says, I feel the same way. I'd be looking for y'all to prove something for me. Another juror says, I'm looking for, I would expect the full burden to be on the state. I would expect there to be a turn of refuting what the state brought as evidence. So the defense says, I guess there was one of the jurors that was nodding his head after the guy was speaking. He says he thinks taking an oath is serious and he's married and he takes his vow serious or something. I don't know. It was weird. Anyways, so all the while that they were talking to them, there was a monitor in the room that they were in, and there was like slides that was going on there. Like, I can see that there was words on the screen that they were like showing them, but I couldn't make out what it said. So I noted that. I was like, they're showing them slides, but I can't tell what the slides are. And then so one of the jurors wanted to get an example on what reasonable doubt is. So they said, like, is it fair to ask for an example of reasonable doubt? And the defense attorney said that he can't give them the percentage of reasonable doubt, right? Like, I can't say that a prosecution, in order for it to be reasonable doubt, they have to prove 99% that he's guilty. Or I can't, like, reasonable doubt isn't like 99% I think he might be guilty or 1% he may not be guilty. He said, what reasonable doubt is to you? Like, do you like what you think reasonable doubt is? Like, we can't tell you what reasonable doubt, like what the percentage is or what is reasonable. Like, we can't tell you that. You have to think for yourself, basically. Um, so, um, oh, so then he wanted to know like if there was anybody who was gonna hold it against him if he didn't take the stand. And one person said that she wouldn't be able to set aside her like formed opinion already. Another person says, this doesn't seem logical. I want to hear the other side of a story. In my brain, I want to hear two sides to a story. So she was like, it doesn't seem logical that the defense doesn't have to like tell their side. She's like, I want to hear both sides. Like, I want to hear their side and I want to hear your side. Like, that's not logical to me that the defense doesn't have to prove the case. Like, you know how they say the burden is on the state. So that part, she's like, shouldn't y'all have to prove it too? Like, I want to hear both sides. And then the defense says the law says that you have to be able to change your brain and follow this. And she said, it will be hard to say not guilty if I didn't hear the person's side of the story. Another person says, same as she said, the way my brain works, I can say I will follow it. But if I go back to the jury room, I'm going to say, why didn't he say something? The defense attorney says, why might a person not testify? So you guys are saying that you would hold it against him. And again, this is me like inferring stuff, but he was alluding, like basically saying like, based on what they had just said, you guys are saying that you need him to testify or you are holding against him. Well, what are reasons that he might not testify? Like what's a reason to you that a person might not testify? So then somebody said that they said if the presentation from the government is not sufficient, there is no reason to. So one of the jurors said, hey, like, I think that the reason that a juror might not testify is because the state's case is weak, basically. Another person says another reason why they might not testify is they might not be eloquent or able to speak in front of that many people. Another person says if you're not going to stand up for yourself, then they said if you're not going to stand up for yourself, then who is? Belief in oneself. So they kept saying over and over, like, belief in oneself. Like, if you're not going to stand up for yourself, then who is? Basically saying in so many words, like, you need to defend yourself by testifying. Another person says another reason why they might not testify is if they were advised not to. Another person says a reason why they think that they might not testify is if they were young and they may be shy or they may be under pressure and it might be difficult. And so at this time, the defense said, Melo, close your ears. He was like, Melo, close your ears. So when he said that, Karmelo Anthony looked and he was like, so everybody in the overflow room, they start busting up laughing because you kind of seen his personality and his interaction with his lawyer. His lawyer was like, Melo, cover your ears. And then he was like, like this. And then his defense attorney started talking about like, reasons why a person might, they might not be eloquent in speaking or whatever. But he didn't really say anything that Melo needed to really cover his ears. But that interaction, like I said, it kind of like, it kind of showed his personality, like, Melo, cover your ears, showing like, oh, this is these are innocent ears here. Like, this is an innocent man. Like, let's not share, basically inferring he's a child, anyways. So, I thought that was interesting. So he talked about, people speaking eloquent and how he said that, in so many words, the defense was saying, you guys might, have these questions of like, oh, maybe they're not eloquent or whatever, but he emphasized how the burden was not on them. So it's not up to them to prove whether or not the person is eloquent or not. Like, it doesn't matter whether they're eloquent or not, because by law, their right is that they don't have to testify. That was what he said in so many words. Again, I was writing and paraphrasing. And then another guy, he talked about a reason why you might not testify. And he said a reason why is because it's our constitutional right not to self-incriminate. All right. So then the defense said, all right, well, let's switch topics to Texas law about weapons. He says Texas gives people a lot of rights to weapons, and that law also extends to weapons that are not just guns. He said that this was an open carry state and there are lax laws about people being able to carry guns. And he said that, would it surprise you that that same law applies to knives? And he said that same law applies to knives as well. He said you can take a small knife under 5 inches into a public place, and that's not breaking the law. And nothing that says it's a crime for a teenager to do that under Texas law. He said, what do you guys think about that? Like, what do you guys think about the fact that it's not illegal to carry a knife, and it's not illegal to be a teenager and carry a knife into a public place? There's nothing in the law that says that that's illegal. And he's like, what do you think about that? Like, what do you guys think about that? And then one of the guys commenting, he says, although it's the law, I do think that that's kind of crazy. He was like, that's crazy. Like, the guy was like, what? Like, that's crazy. He said that's like, I don't know, like I don't know if I'll be able to take the oath of being a juror, because I feel like that's crazy. And then the defense says under Texas law, it's not against the law for me to take a knife under 5 inches into a public place. Despite that being the case, would you feel still that's engaging in criminal activity? And the judge told him to rephrase his question. And the prosecution was like, they started getting antsy. Like, he was like going into territory he wasn't supposed to. And they were like acting like they about to get up or whatever. Like, what was said? The judge was like, rephrase. Like, I was like, oh, it's getting cooked. It was like, it's heating up in here, And then it started heating up some more. I was like, okay, they got a lot going on. They got a lot going on. All right. So he said self-defense under Texas law. We have a right to self-defense under Texas law. It says a person is justified when and to the degree they feel that force is necessary. You don't have to wait until somebody hits you to defend yourself. A person who has a right to be present where the force is used and you're not involved in criminal activity, you don't have to retreat before force is issued. So he was basically giving them the actual law on self-defense. Like, despite what you think self-defense isn't when you wait till somebody beats you up and you're all bloody, then you can defend yourself. Self-defense is when you feel, and hold on, let me go back and read it exactly because I jotted it down. It says, a person under Texas law, it says a person is justified when and to the degree they feel that force is necessary. You don't have to wait until somebody hits you to defend yourself. A person who has a right to be present where the force is used and you're not involved in criminal activity, you don't have to retreat before force is issued. And then I put in a note and I said the prosecution does not like that he keeps mentioning a knife, because every time he mentioned the fact about a knife being not illegal under 5.5, the prosecution was like, he was inching, like, like he about to about to get up and object, like he was on the edge of his seat every time he mentioned a knife in 5.5. He was like, So He then talked about justification and what justifies self-defense. And then he says, so let's take, for example, he says, you're in a public place with friends and family, and I walk up uninvited, and you say, hey, I don't know you. You need to leave. The prosecution jumped up. As soon as he said that, the prosecution jumped up out of his seat. Objection. Because he's using the exact facts of the case, just with a different scenario. And they're not supposed to be speaking the exact facts of the case. But what he did was, instead of saying a person went to a track meet, he said a park. And they felt like, well, what I assume, because he made the objection and they went talk to the judge. What I assume is that analogy is too close to the facts of the case. So they objected. They and I'll say what he said again. He said, you're in a public place with friends and family, and I walk up uninvited, and you say, hey, I don't know you. I need you to leave. That's when the objection came in. They went to the judge. The judge, I guess, sustained the analogy, like sustained it, and he had to rephrase. So he came back and he said, let's talk about the duty to retreat. A lot of people feel if it was them, they would just turn and walk away. How many feel like that when faced with an aggressive situation, they would just walk away? How many of you would expect other people to do that? What do you think? And then one of the jurors says, I'm not keen on conflict. I would let the person leave. There are times force is necessary, though. Another person says, I do agree with that. Talking about self-defense would need to be proved. Another person says, getting through the definition of words, the word provoked is like, how is that legally defined? So they wanted to know, like, what do you guys legally define the word provoke? Like, what's the legal definition of somebody provoking you? And so he said, you can't goad somebody into attacking you. That's provoking. And then somebody said, so you're saying the judge will determine whether it's self-defense or not. So I found this to be interesting. So the juror wanted to know, who's going to determine whether or not this is self-defense? Is it the judge? And the defense said that it cannot be determined whether this is self-defense until the entire trial goes by. So, like, everybody presents all the evidence, and at the end of that, there's going to be a time where at the very end that the judge decides if he thinks self-defense was raised and appropriate for them to determine. So if the judge listens to all the claims and, Karmelo Anthony saying, he felt like, it was self-defense, and the judge feels like he doesn't feel like it met the mark, then he can say, this ain't self-defense and it's not something that the jury will consider. But if the judge hears all the evidence and at the end of that, if he decides that he does think that self-defense is something for them to consider, then they will go back to the jury, and that will be something that they would also determine. So basically, they would then determine like sudden passion or whatever at that point, but not until the judge hears the case and decides. So it doesn't start off from the front like, oh, let's consider self-defense now. It's up to the judge whether he's only going to be facing first-degree murder or if they can consider anything else. And that's not until the end. All right. So like if it meets the legal standards, then that's when the judge will decide. All right. So hold on. Okay. All right. So another person says, if self-defense is raised, is self-defense not murder? If self-defense is raised, is self-defense not murder? So the defense says, anybody feel they're going to feel the defense needs to show proof, or else they are going to hold that against them? Which best describes your feelings on the... Oh, so he switched gears at this point. Like, he was the judge had told him, I think he only had like 5 minutes left or something like that. Or he only had like, hold on. Wait, maybe, okay. Yeah, he only had like 5 minutes left. And so he switched topics completely. So after he switched topics completely, he wanted to know from 1 to 10 what they felt about the current immigration policies in America as it pertains to ICE. So I said to myself, I'm like, is this his clever way of trying to find out who's MAGA and who's not? And by him trying to find out who's MAGA and who's not, is that him gauging who's possibly not favorable of Black people? So his question was, which best describes your feelings on the country's immigration policies, with 1 meaning I agree and it's about time they got the... Well, I'm paraphrasing. He said it's about time they got these immigrants, something to that effect. And 10 being you disagree with the current policy with ICE and all that. So 1 means that you strongly agree with ICE and how they're going about it in the country. And 10 means that you strongly disagree. So they were asked to give a number between 1 through 10 on what they feel about ICE. So somebody was like, what do you mean by that? Like, I don't know what the policies are. And he was like, well, I don't want to put anything into your mind. I don't want to like give you the answer. I don't want to like tell you what the policies are. I just, based on your knowledge of what the policies are, based on your knowledge of what's happening with ICE, what do you gauge what's going on in the country? Like, do you rate it a 1, like it's about time that they got to this, or do you rate it a 10 and you disagree with what's going on? So I'm going to just list off I'm not going to list off what number they were in the jury. I'm just going to list off the numbers. So 1 said 5, another person said 6, another person said 8, another person said 6, another person said 5, another person said 3. Then once they got to 13 said, I don't want to answer. Then the next person said 5. Then after that, more people started to not want to answer. All right. So 13 said they don't want to answer. All right. So then the next person said 5. Then the next person after that said they didn't want to answer. The next person after that said 5. Next person said 5. The next person said 2. The next person said they don't want to answer. The next person said 10. And then the next person said about time 1. It was the way that they said it that got me. I was like, because everybody was like 5, 10, 7, 1, like that. And then, there was a couple that said, well, I don't want to answer. And then when it got to that person, they said, about time 1. So then the next person said 10. Another one said 4. Another one said they don't want to answer. Another one said 5. I don't want to answer. 7. Another one said 4. Another one said they didn't want to answer, didn't want to answer, didn't want to answer. Then 48, I wrote a comment and I said, oh, this person is Black. I literally wrote that in my note, Black. because I could hear their voice and I could tell they were Black. 48, who at the end was left in the final pool, they were the one of the last Black people that got struck. But it was so funny that I noticed, I was like, Black. But anyways, so 48 said 10, so like they strongly disagree. And then the next number said they didn't want to answer. Then the next number said 6. Next number said 10. Next number said 10. The number after that said 6. The other number said 7. And this number also, this was the Black person right here, and they got struck off the jury. And so a lot of the Black people, where I'm looking at their tallies, they were higher on the scale of disagreeing with ICE and stuff like that. So, and you know, amongst other things. So this question said a lot without saying a lot. You get what I'm saying? Like, it said so much without. Anyways, y'all get my drift. All right, so let's see where we at. Okay, so another person says 6, 7. Don't want to answer, don't want to answer. This person said 3. This person said 5. This person said 9. This person didn't want to answer. This person said 10. This person said 4. This person said 6. This person said 3. Didn't want to answer. This person said 5. This person said didn't want to answer. Didn't want to answer. This person said 3. This person said 8, 7. Then the 5, didn't want to answer, and then 5. So once they got up to 88, then they stopped asking, because all of the rest of the people, they were not gonna like make it into the pool, so they didn't like waste their time on the entire group. So they just did like the first 88, and then they stopped. So after that, he said, so a lot of people feel 5 years is something they can't consider under any circumstance. So he wanted to know if there was anybody who felt like 5 years is too low of a number to sentence him to jail, like for murder. And he said, if you find somebody guilty of recklessly murdering somebody, what about manslaughter? And what do you feel about the manslaughter range being 2 to 20 years? So one of the jurors said 2 years is too light for killing someone without knowing the evidence. Another person says, to me, no matter what, like, they were saying, like, no matter what the evidence is, they don't care. They feel like 2 years is too light of a sentence. And to have to look at somebody's family in the face and say, yeah, we just gave them 2 years. That's what juror number 142 said. Juror number 19 also said, you know, they feel like that's too light of a sentence. Another juror said, this was juror number 43, said, I got a family member who got a DUI and got 1 year. So 2 years is too low for murder. And then the defense wanted to know that if he was found guilty and the range was under 10 years. So I guess if you get found guilty of a crime and your sentence is 10 years or less, you can be considered up for probation, like to commute your sentence to probation. So basically, where they suspend your jail term and they put it on like probation. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So like, let's say I'm sentenced to 10 years, but I have the possibility of serving my sentence of my 10 years on probation instead of serving it in jail. So he wanted to know what they felt about that. So he asked if they can consider him serving his sentence out on probation if he was found guilty of manslaughter. So 3 of the jurors said that they could not consider probation under any circumstance. They feel like for killing somebody, that's unacceptable. All right. So then another juror says, oh, so then they wanted to know if they would try to look up things for the case. And then one of the jurors says, no way, I will try to look things up. Then there was another juror who they were like, you heard about, the media, and you heard the judge's orders that, you're not supposed to discuss the case with anybody. You're not supposed to research the case. You're not supposed to talk about the case. Do you feel like if you were on the jury, you can follow the rules that you will not look up the case or try to find out any information on the case? And one of the jurors, she jumped up and she says, oh no, like she was like, I'm not looking up anything on the case. She said, Judge Roach is scary. Because if you see the way that he moves, he comes off like very scary. All right. So oh, and then he talked about the questionnaires that they filled out. So in order for them to consider like who's going to be on the jury, they also had them fill out this questionnaire. So he referenced the people in the questionnaire that had questions for him. So he said that I got a lot of questions on the questionnaire about how can you defend those people? And he basically said that he wanted to, respond to the people who said that type of rhetoric and like that. And then he was like explaining how like people have a right to, defense, blah, blah. Then he went to talk about each side gets 10 strikes each. So after they have, okay, so out of all the jurors that were there were several of them who raised concerns and said, I don't think I can set aside my bias. I don't think I could be fair and impartial. I don't think I can follow the evidence. I don't think I can make a determination because of his age. I don't think because of his race I could decide, or I don't think because I have kids that are the same age, I don't think that I could make a decision. After all of those people are removed from the jury, so basically they're going to go and they're going to go through all the people who said that they can't set aside, they absolutely cannot set aside any biases. They're going to be removed. So the two black guys who said I can't put a brother in jail, he didn't say this, but I'm just telling y'all, like, that would include them. Like, okay, once all those people who can't put aside their bias, they're going to get removed. Once all of the people with biases or any type of thing that is a concern to the court or whatever, once all of those people get removed, then after that, the prosecution and the defense is going to have 10 strikes each. And then I think it brought it up to, they ended up having 12 strikes, both of them. So after they go through all of that, they're going to each side's going to have 10 strikes to be able to for whatever reason, but it can't be based on race or a discriminatory reason. For whatever reason, they can strike the jurors for those slots. Okay? And that's what the prosecution used to strike out the rest of the black jurors. But we'll get to that in a second. All right, so then he talks about their rights as a juror. All right, so then the judge spoke and he said that this is not his normal courtroom. He's going to go back, discuss and confer with the lawyers, and then he'll be back. So we went on a break. The judge came back. And when the judge came back, he said, all right, anybody with the number 150 and above, You guys are all excused. Thank you for coming to jury duty. But anybody with number 150 and up, so between 150 to 449, anybody who falls in between those numbers, both the defense and the prosecution have agreed to excuse you. So they released them. So then after everybody 150 and above was released, then he came back and he said, number 14, you're excused. Number 13, you're excused. Number 19, you're excused. Number 41, you're excused. 42, you're excused. 43, you're excused. 46, you're excused. 68, you're excused. 70, you're excused. And then he said, all right, so now after those people are excused, now it's 90 left. He said, let's take about 30 to 45 minutes. We're going to try to dwindle down this 90 that's left. We're going to dwindle them down. And then we're going to use our preemptive strikes. So they went to the back, they exercised their preemptive strikes. And then when they came back, that is when the defense put in his motion that he felt like 3 of the strikes that the prosecution used was based on race. He said that he feels like the only reason why they eliminated juror 27, 37, and 48 was because they are all Black jurors and the defendant is African American, and they like intentionally eliminated all of the remaining Black jurors. So after they dwindled it down to 90 and then they gave those exemptions, 3 Black people were left amongst them, and he felt like it was racially motivated to get them off. So he said after both sides used their preemptive challenges, those 3 were 100% of the Black jurors. We believe they were struck based on race or gender. They left a 25-year-old, one of the 2 18 similar situated to 37, 37, and 38, something. And then the judge asked, like, okay, so what do you think about that? So basically the challenge that he gave them is called the Batson challenge. So the motion that he raised was Batson versus Kentucky. So it stems from a landmark 1986 Supreme Court case, Batson versus Kentucky, where the ruling states that a prosecutor cannot use peremptory strikes, which are usually strikes given to attorneys to eliminate a juror without giving a reason, to exclude jurors solely based on race, organized under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. To prove the state is acting in bad faith, the court must execute a 3-step legal test. So 1, the defense must show facts and circumstances that raise an inference that the prosecution used their strikes to exclude a juror based on race. It says number 2, the burden shifts to the prosecution, and they must step up to the microphone and provide a race-neutral reason for every single one of those strikes. And then the third thing, the judge has to make a determination. So basically what happened was the judge asked both sides, what is your basis for the argument? And the defense argued that I believe that they prejudiced the rest of the jury based on race, and that's the only reason why. And the prosecution said, oh, Your Honor, well, we didn't know that all those jurors that we struck were Black. We thought, based on one of the names, we thought that she was Middle Eastern. And he said that he thought that it was only 2 jurors that they struck, but he thought that one of them was Middle Eastern, and he didn't think that she was Black. And they read off her name. I'm not going to tell you guys her name, but they said her name in open court, and they were like, her name is XYZ. And because we heard this name, we thought that she was Middle Eastern. And so then the defense, he chimed in and he said, how could you think that she was Middle Eastern when on her bio form, she listed her race as African American / Black? So how can you assume that she's Middle Eastern based on her name when she listed her race on her form and her form is Black? So he was basically saying that, Judge, they're being disingenuous. How can they think that she's Middle Eastern when it literally says that she's Black? And then so he went and he had one of his clerks go and get the form that showed that she checked off that she was Black and that she was not Middle Eastern. So then the judge told them, what is their basis for eliminating them? Like, if you guys are saying that you guys did not eliminate them because you thought that they were Black, what other reason did you eliminate them? And so the prosecution said, well, we didn't eliminate because they're Black. Absolutely not. Like, we're not going to eliminate a person just because they're Black. Judge, we decided to get rid of every single teacher on the jury. We feel as though we want to strike all of the teachers, and it just so happened, and I'm paraphrasing, but it just so happened to be a coincidence that they're Black, but all of them are teachers. And we decided to strike all of the teachers. So it's not because of the race, it's only because they're teachers. And because we don't have teachers on the jury, we chose to get rid of them. So after they set the record straight and they said that it wasn't based on race, and even though they thought that the lady was Middle Eastern, it wasn't even the fact that she was Middle Eastern the reason why they chose to strike her. They only struck her because she was a teacher, and all of the last Black jurors were all teachers. And the judge then said, well, is there anybody else on the jury that is a teacher that wasn't struck? And the defense said that there was still a person that was a teacher, but she wasn't a teacher of a school. She was a teacher of esthetician school. So she was a teacher of face, eyelash, stuff like that. So she wasn't a teacher of a school. So that don't count. But all of the teachers that are educators, they were not, it wasn't about the race. So the judge said, okay, well, I'm going to take that under advisement. The screen went black for like a few moments. And then he came back and he said, all right, well, based on what the prosecution said, I'm going to deny your motion. And we're going to he basically denied them the ability to have the Black jurors because he said that the reason that they gave had nothing to do with race and it was not race. He didn't say it's not racist, but basically they gave us an excuse, and the excuse is that they're teachers, and based on that reason, then it's cool. It's okay. It's fine. So we're not going to have them on the jury. Right. So then after that, he said that he's now going to announce the jury. And then that is when he announced the jury. And he announced all of their numbers. I'm not going to announce the final jurors, but he announced all of their numbers, and we were able to see all of them walk across the screen. So one by one, he called their number and he told them to walk from one side of the room to the other side. So as he called their name, they walked across, and all I remember was I seen a lot of blonde hair. That's all I remember. I seen a lot of blonde hair. I was like, blonde, 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 blonde. Male, but blonde, blonde male, blonde woman, blonde, I was just seeing a lot of blonde heads, a lot of ash brown, a lot of blonde, a lot of kind of colors like that of the hair. I seen one lady that she was wearing, like, out of all of them that was going by, one kind of looked like she was of Asian descent, possibly. And then another person looked like maybe Middle Eastern. Everybody else looked like they had blonde hair to me. But, just a figure of, speech. Not literally what their hair color literally is, but figuratively. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, so we were able to see the jurors walk across the screen, and yeah, none of them are Black. So that was all that happened today. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry that the live was so lengthy. I was trying to not make another live go almost 2 hours, but I felt like all of the details were very important. Hopefully you guys were able to follow along. I know that, it, like I said, it was time consuming listening to, but again, I wanted to try to make you guys feel like you were in the room too, and give you guys the details without, saying too much. But thank you guys so much. If you guys would like to donate to my travel fund, my Cash App is Neek at Night Media. I do appreciate all of you guys who have been sending kind words. I even appreciate the new people who like are saying certain things as well. It's like, oh dang, racism does exist. Oh dang, people, like, sometimes you get into a bubble. So I was talking to somebody, right, and they were talking about how they live in Texas and how the degree of racism that they have witnessed. And I realized that I've grown up around people being racist, but I don't think I've been in this level. Like, this level that it's a different, it's like it's up here. Like, I think me living in California, like, I've dealt with people being this, but it was probably like around like here. You know what I mean? But it's giving, like, in this area from what people are describing, that it's like, like, get on the field, boy. It's kind of giving that. Like, I'm used to like a Karen here and there, but the level that they're describing, I'm not from here, but the level that they're describing that's like in the area is like, get on that field, boy, pick some cotton. You get my drift? But anyways, so that's interesting. It, like, I had to realize, I was like, dang, I kind of feel like, I'm like, have I been living in a bubble? Because I'm not used to people, like, I know that there's so many people that don't like Black people. They don't like us just because of our skin. But here, like, I was looking at some of the people, not some, a particular person that was there, and you can just look at them and see the hate. Like, when they look at you, you can feel like, I hate you, us. Like, you can just feel it. Like, the energy that exudes off of them is, I don't like you. I don't know you. I don't know your character. I don't know anything about you. All I know, and this is my opinion, certain people, it just feels like it's so thick, like the vitriol. It's like, you don't even know me. But just because, like, it's like, damn, like, I didn't even do nothing to you, and you just giving, like, it's giving that. So when somebody give me that, I'm not giving nice. I'm giving, you stay over there, I'm gonna stay over here. I'm not gonna say nothing to you. Don't say nothing to me. You could give all the looks, all of the eyeballs, all of the steam, all of the very, like, oh my God. Like all of that, like you can give it can give all of that, but just don't say nothing to me. I promise you, you don't say nothing to me, I won't say nothing to you. You don't mess with me, I will mess with you. Stay over there. You know what I mean? But you can just feel it, like it just exudes. I can't stand y'all. Okay. And so it's a different ball game here in Texas. And I was just like, dang, I've been around white people in California and I just never felt it to that degree. Like it just, it's like in the back of your mind, you think like, does this person not like me because I'm Black? But it just gives like, you know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So anyways, yeah, so that's like something interesting to like, it's like, damn, like this is real. Like they like, whew, like everything is, oh, Karmelo Anthony supporter, this or that. And it's just like interesting. But that's all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys on the next one.